Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro, friends. On today's episode of the podcast, we're talking about the unintended consequences of the coronavirus pandemic. This is coming off the back of the last few episodes where we talked about the paycheck versus the unemployment check situation, as well as sold out gone fishing and a few other things. But before we get started, just a quick reminder that you need to go and register for our free 3-day online event, A New Coffee Industry, at mapperforward.org/events. So, the unintended consequences of the coronavirus pandemic. I don't know that there's particularly any intended consequences of any kind of pandemic, but it just depends on how you look at things. When something like this happens, we don't necessarily expect that certain things are going to come out of it. But we definitely have experienced some things that we didn't anticipate. And one of those things has been that the veil has been very quickly lifted on a lot of the systems, governmental systems, life systems, industry systems in the coffee industry, our personal and business experiences within the realm of our professionalism. The veil has been lifted on all of those systems, and it's become very clear what's broken and what's not broken. One great example of that is the paycheck versus the unemployment check situation. And I think that as an industry, we had hoped that at some point we would sort out this situation. The coronavirus pandemic is bringing all of that to a very quick head, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out. What happens when we start going back and cafes and roasteries start opening back up? Are we just going to expect our staff to go back to the wages that they were experiencing before? I don't know that we can. I don't know that we should. I think we need to start engaging, and we perhaps may be forced to engage in discussions that require us to start looking at this situation very quickly. Another unintended consequence in that realm where the veil has been lifted off is that the businesses that were hanging on by a shoestring, that had some had led businesses to believe that they were doing great, others hadn't. But the businesses that actually weren't doing as well as they were perhaps letting people believe they were, haven't survived. And I see that as an unintended consequence of anything, really. This is really forcing us to assess this idea of a barrier to entry into our industry and what will come after this. And so if we continue to just operate as an industry the way that we were operating before, and by that what I mean is anyone who wants to open a cafe can open a cafe and will open a cafe. I don't want to stop anyone from doing anything. You should open a cafe if you want to open a cafe. I want you to do well though. I want you to succeed. I want you to have the best chance at not having to close if something like this were to happen again. And in order to do that, we have to increase the barrier to entry, or you personally should increase the barrier that you place on your entry into business ownership. We are starting to see very quickly the businesses that just crumbled because they were built on a house of cards. They didn't have the leadership, they didn't have the culture, they didn't have the structure, the working capital, the cash flow, any of it that was built. And look, you can never predict how something like this is going to go, but most of the businesses that have survived are businesses that were run well and had been run on a solid concrete foundation rather than on a house of cards. Now, that's not to say that the businesses that failed were all being horribly run. That's not what I'm saying, but a good proportion of them were. That's also not saying that all the businesses that have survived were being run well. It just means that they perhaps being backed by people with bottomless pockets. What are some of the other unintended consequences of this? We got to see the value that influencers play in our industry, and the real value that influencers who are perhaps not as functional as we thought they were, we got to see what role they really play in the industry and in our lives. Celebrities became seriously unnecessary, almost annoying, when they were trying to pitch us their latest clothes or their, photos of previous gigs or things from the Met Gala, missing the Met Gala. The influencers in our life, the influencers in the coffee industry, people who were deemed influencers who weren't really influencers in the way that we need them to be in moments like this, were really exposed. And the chatter that I was hearing anyway was that people were reassessing the way that they viewed people. And this leads me to my next observation with regards to unintended consequences in the coffee industry as a result of this pandemic. We really got to see, or this really is bringing forward people's capacity to lead. Also, it's exposing the people who we thought that were leaders. Some of them are really coming to show us that that capacity, they didn't step up. And this is one of those moments when true leadership really does mean something. It really does require you to have the backbone and the foundation of true leadership in order to demonstrate that you're able to really take an unpredictable situation and flow with it. You're able to help people find their bearing as quickly as possible. And we're going to talk a lot about this on the third day of the workshop next week on May 14th. Yep, 14th. That's the day that I'm going to be running the workshop. I'll be doing a leadership workshop on that day. And we're going to explore this at length because particularly we're talking about leading yourself and leading others in times of uncertainty. And one thing this pandemic has absolutely done is people who weren't really called to step up before because they were perhaps in the shadows of people who were just louder. When those people were faced with the opportunity to step up and in the wake of nobody else taking leadership, they did. There are a lot of examples of that. So that's a really positive unintended consequence of this pandemic. The people really got to see what they were made of. And hopefully you got to discover where your new strengths are, and you got to grow some heart muscles and got to grow some mind muscles during this pandemic. I get the feeling as the days roll on right now, I get the feeling that people are so sick of being inside that a lot of governments, local and state, are going to just start opening things up. And I'm noticing that I'm talking about this pandemic as though it's over, even though for me and my mindset, it's not. But there are a lot of people that are pushing in a big way to have everything opened back up. And I just get the sense that people are going to say, let's just do it and see what happens. I don't know how I feel about that. I really don't know how I feel about that. But I do know that our capacity to weather this situation has been stress tested. our capacity to come together has been stress tested. So much of our systems have been stress tested throughout this situation. And I don't know where we're at with regards to the pandemic. We don't know whether we're just beginning or, by just beginning, I mean just beginning to enter the next phase of this, or if we're still in the middle of the first phase of the pandemic. Are we almost done? Are we going to experience a second wave? I don't know. But I do know that we're not done learning. We're not done learning from this. And I think that there are people who are going to come out of this much better off than when they came into this. And I know that there are people that are going to come out of this broken. I wonder which one you are. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave your ideas about how you fared through this pandemic so far. And have you discovered unintended consequences that have affected you throughout this pandemic? Let us know in the comments or via email, support@mapperforward.org. Don't forget to get your tickets for the online event at mapperforward.org/events. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of your day.